In the heart of a storm, some find shelter. Others become the storm. For Captain Eva Rostova, call sign Valkyrie, the choice had already been made. Her A-10 Thunderbolt II, a machine they called the Warthog, screamed through a canyon just feet above the rocks. Every rivet in the airframe groaned in protest. On her radio, a voice, crackling with static and desperation, was her only guide. Valkyrie, this is Trident Lead, the voice of Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander Jake Callahan. Rasped. Enemy positions are dug in on the North Ridge. We are taking effective fire. God, they're everywhere. Eva's knuckles were white on the control stick. Copy. Trident Lead. I see the ridge. How's your ammo? A pause, filled with the sharp crack of distant gunfire. That's the thing, Valkyrie, Jake's voice returned, heavy with a dread that chilled Eva to the bone. We are out. I repeat, we are Winchester on all primaries. We are down to sidearms and bad language. Out of ammo. Stranded. The most elite fighting force on the planet, pinned down and helpless. They were out of range for rescue, out of time for a miracle. The chain of command had written them off, deeming the mission too risky, the anti-aircraft threat too dense. But the chain of command hadn't accounted for her point 3 days earlier. Captain Eva Rostova wasn't a storm. She was a ghost, living in the shadow of a giant. That giant was her father, General Ivan Rostova, a legendary pilot whose portrait hung in the officers' club, his steely gaze a constant reminder of the legacy she could never seem to escape. To some, the name Rostova was a key that opened doors. To Eva, it was a cage. She stood at the back of the briefing room, arms crossed, listening to the polished, condescending tone of Colonel Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a man carved from ambition and political savvy, a fighter jock who preferred the corridors of the Pentagon to the confines of a cockpit. He paced before the projection screen, a map of a hostile mountain range in Afghanistan glowing behind him. The objective is a high value. Target, gentlemen, Thorne said, his voice smooth as silk but laced with steel. Intel suggests his holdup in the Tarmac Valley. A nasty piece of real estate. SEAL Team Trident, led by Commander Callahan, will be inserting via helicopter under the cover of darkness. A young F-16 pilot raised his hand. Colonel, what about close air support? That valley is a death trap. Thorne smiled, a thin, predatory expression. An astute observation, Lieutenant. The valley is seeded with next-generation manpads, man-portable air defense systems. Stinger class, maybe better. Sending in high-altitude assets like the F-16 or F-35 would be suicide. They'd be painted by radar before they even cross the border. He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room. It landed on Eva, and his smile tightened. And sending in a low and slow asset, he let the words hang in the air, a deliberate insult. Well, that would just be serving them up a target. On a silver platter. No, this will be a ground-pounder show. Trident is the best there is. They'll get it done. The dismissal was as loud as a slap. An A-10, the low and slow asset he was mocking, was her aircraft. It was the only aircraft designed for precisely this kind of treacherous, high-threat environment. The Warthog wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but it was a flying tank, built around a 7-barrel Gatling gun that could shred armor like paper. It was an angel on the shoulder of the infantryman. But in Thorne's world of sleek, billion-dollar jets, the A-10, and by extension, its pilots, were relics.as. The briefing concluded. The pilots filed out, a few of them casting sympathetic glances her way. Eva remained, her jaw tight. She wasn't just a pilot to Thorne. She was Rostova's daughter, a legacy higher in his eyes, a woman in a world he still considered a boys' club. He saw her success not as a product of her grit, but of her name, Jake Callahan, already in his combat gear, stopped by her side. His face was grim, streaked with camouflage paint. He was tall, with the quiet confidence of a man who had walked through hell and come back with stories he'd never tell. He and Eva had come up through training together, long before her father's name meant anything more than a tough instructor. Don't let him get to you, Eva, he said, his voice low. He's sending you in there blind, Jake. No eyes in the sky, no backup. He's putting you on a leash and calling it a tactical advantage. We know the risks, Jake replied, his eyes meeting hers. There was a deep, unspoken trust between them, forged in simulated dogfights and grueling survival exercises. We'll be fine. Just keep a hog warm for us, okay? He gave her a quick nod and was gone, disappearing with the rest of his team into the fading light. The nickname for her plane, Hawg, sounded different coming from him. Not an insult, but a term of endearment. A plea, Eva walked out of the command center into the dry desert evening. The air smelled of sagebrush and jet fuel. Instead of heading to her sterile apartment, she walked to Hangar 4, where her A-10, tail number 261, sat under the dim sodium lights. She called it Hawg Wild. The nose was painted with the snarling face of a wild boar, a defiant grin on its tusks. She ran a hand along its fuselage, the metal cool beneath her touch. The plane was like her, underestimated, tough, and built for a fight nobody else wanted. It didn't have the glamour of an F-22, but it had heart. And it had a cannon that fired 3,900 rounds a minute, a sound the grunts on the ground called freedom's roar. The next 2 days were a slow-burn agony. Eva was assigned to routine patrol flights over the Nevada desert, pointless circles in the sky while Jake and his team were halfway across the world, walking into a hornet's nest. She followed the mission reports, her stomach twisting with every coded update. Insertion successful. Proceeding to objective. Then, the updates became less frequent. Longer periods of silence stretched between them. She knew what that silence meant. Trouble. The kind of trouble that eats good men alive. She was in the pilot's lounge, nursing a cup of bitter coffee, when the first frantic report came through. The command channel, not meant for her ears. A junior communications officer, his voice cracking with panic, was speaking to the watch commander. "Sir, Trident is pinned down. They've made contact, heavy contact. They're surrounded, requesting immediate air support." Another voice, colder and more authoritative, cut in. It was Thorne. "Negative. Air support is denied. The risk calculus has not changed. Tell them to break contact and exfiltrate to the secondary extraction point." "Sir, they can't. The enemy is between them and the secondary EZ. They're completely cut off." Eva stood up, the coffee cup slipping from her hand and shattering on the linoleum floor. Her blood ran cold. Thorne's voice was emotionless, clinical. "Commander Callahan is an exemplary officer. I'm sure he'll find a solution. Maintain radio silence unless they report a change in status." The transmission ended. It was a death sentence, delivered with bureaucratic detachment. Thorne wasn't just denying them support, he was erasing them. He was willing to sacrifice an entire SEAL team to avoid the political fallout of a downed aircraft. His career was more important than their lives. In that moment, something inside Eva snapped. The years of being underestimated, of biting her tongue, of fighting to be seen as more than just her father's daughter, it all coalesced into a single point of white-hot clarity. Her duty wasn't to a man like Thorne. Her duty was to the men on the ground. To Jake. She turned and walked, not ran, out of the lounge. Her steps were deliberate, each one a hammer blow against the injustice. She bypassed the official channels, heading straight for the one person on the base who operated on a currency of loyalty older than any regulation. Master Sergeant Sarge Kowalski, her crew chief. Sarge was a relic himself, a man whose hands were permanently stained with grease and whose face was a roadmap of 1,000 deployments. He'd been her father's crew chief, too. He was working on an engine in the hangar, a wrench in his hand, when Eva approached. "I need my bird, Sarge," she said, her voice steady. "Fueled and armed. Full combat load. Depleted uranium rounds for the GAU-8. Sarge stopped his work, wiping his hands on an already filthy rag. He looked at her, his shrewd eyes seeing everything. The fire, the desperation, the resolve. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He'd heard the scuttlebutt on the comms. "Your name's not on the flight schedule, Captain," he said. His voice a low gravel. "Thorne has you grounded pending a readiness review. This isn't about the schedule, Sarge. And you know it." He held her gaze for a long moment, the silence in the cavernous hangar thick with unspoken history. He saw Ivan Rostova's stubborn pride in her eyes, but something else, too. Something fiercer. Something all her own. "Finally," he grunted. "The logbook will say you're taking her up for an unscheduled engine diagnostic. A red line stress test. Needs to be done away from the base, over the restricted ranges." He pointed with his wrench toward Hawg Wild. "Gives you about a 3-hour window before anyone with shiny shoulders starts asking questions. The ordnance, that's A different problem. That request has to be signed off by command. A new voice cut in from the shadows of the hangar. I can handle that. Both Eva and Sarge turned. A young airman, the same comms tech she'd heard on the radio, stepped forward. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly, but his eyes were resolute. Colonel Thorne is wrong, the airman said, his voice barely a whisper. What he's doing is wrong. He held out a data pad. I backdated the authorization request. It's got the digital signature from yesterday's training exercise. As far as the system is concerned, those Mavericks and Sidewinders were loaded. For a drill 24 hours ago. Eva stared at the young man, seeing the terror and conviction warring in his expression. He was risking his entire career. For what? For doing the right thing. It was a spark of hope in the suffocating darkness of Thorne's command. A small act of rebellion that could change everything. Sarge nodded slowly, a look of grudging respect on his face. All right, kid. Get to it. You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. He turned back to Eva. Your bird will be ready in 30 minutes. You'd better be long gone by then. As Sarge's team swarmed her A-10, loading missiles, onto its pylons and feeding belts of 30mm shells into its massive cannon, Eva felt a profound shift inside her. She was no longer just following orders. She was making a choice. She was drawing a line in the sand, not with a stick, but with the shadow of a 10-ton attack jet. But as the final checks were being made, the young comms tech ran back toward her, his face ashen. He'd been listening to the encrypted chatter. From the battlefield, Captain, he stammered, out of breath. It's worse than we thought. The intel was wrong. The target isn't just some warlord. He has foreign advisors, and their equipment. It's not just manpads. The SEALs are reporting a fully integrated air defense network. Something new. Something we've never seen before. Eva's stomach dropped. An integrated network meant the individual missile launchers were talking to each other, guided by a central command. It was infinitely more lethal than a few insurgents with shoulder-fired rockets. Thorne hadn't just sent them in blind, he'd sent them to their graves. And now, she was flying straight into the same cemetery. Every soldier faces a moment where the line between duty and defiance blurs into nothing. For Captain Eva Rostova. That moment was now. The canopy of her A-10 slid shut, sealing her in a bubble of glass and titanium, a world of her own making. Below her, Sarge gave a final, sharp salute. It wasn't regulation. It was a gesture of solidarity. A farewell. She taxied Hawg Wild onto the secondary runway, the one used for cargo planes and maintenance flights, away from the prying eyes of the main control tower. Her hands moved with practiced economy, flipping switches, checking gauges. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady hum of the twin turbofan engines. This was it. The point of no return, unidentified aircraft on runway 29er. A voice crackled in her headset from the tower. State your intentions. Eva keyed her MIC, her voice betraying none of the turmoil inside her. Tower, this is Hog 261. Commencing engine diagnostic flight, per maintenance log 7-1-4 Alpha. She used the call sign and log number Sarge and the young airman had fabricated. A flimsy lie, but one that might buy her a few precious minutes. Hog 261, we have no flight planned for you. Hold your position. Eva ignored him. She pushed the throttles forward. The Warthog, heavy with fuel and a full complement of weapons, rumbled down the runway. It wasn't a graceful takeoff. It was a brute force assertion of will, the plane clawing its way into the dark sky. Hog 261, you are not cleared for takeoff. I repeat, you are not cleared. Return to the tarmac immediately. The voice in her ear was growing frantic. She was airborne. As she banked the aircraft away from the base, she saw the lights of Crestwood, the small Nevada town where she lived, shrink behind her. A town full of hopes and dreams, blissfully unaware of the life and death dramas playing out in the skies above and in mountains half a world away. For a fleeting second, she wondered if she'd ever see it again. Then, she shut down the thought. It was a luxury she couldn't afford. A new voice, cold and sharp with fury, blasted through her headset. It was Colonel Thorne. Captain Rostova. You have 30 seconds to explain yourself before I label you a rogue pilot and shoot you out of the sky. Land that aircraft. Now. This was the final test. The ultimate command. To obey meant abandoning. Jake. To disobey meant career suicide, a court-martial, prison. It meant becoming a traitor in the eyes of the Air Force she loved. Eva reached down and flipped a single switch. The radio connected to the base frequency went silent. She was alone, narrator. The flight east was a tense, lonely vigil across thousands of miles. With the help of a series of pre-planned tanker rendezvous, arranged by allies of her father who still held sway in the military's hidden corners and who trusted the Rostova name more than they trusted bureaucrats like Thorne, she made the transatlantic journey. She flew through corridors of darkness, a ghost slipping through the cracks in the system. With each passing hour, with each silent refueling high above the Atlantic, she was moving further from the life she knew and closer to a battle she had no right to be in. The landscape below her eventually shifted from the deep blue of the ocean to the rugged, unforgiving terrain of Afghanistan. Jagged peaks clawed at the sky, their slopes a patchwork of rock and shadow. This was the dragon's lair. She descended, dropping her A-10 until she was flying nap of the earth, using the mountains themselves as a shield against enemy radar. The air grew turbulent, the Warthog bucking and shuddering as it navigated the treacherous passes. Her mission now was twofold: find the SEALs and survive long enough to help them. She switched her radio to the encrypted channel Jake's team was using. Trident team, this is Valkyrie on station. Do you copy? She broadcast into the void silence. The only reply was the hiss of static and the roar of her own engines. A knot of ice formed in her stomach. Was she too late? Had Thorne's calculated delay already sealed their fate? Trident. This is Valkyrie. Jake, do you read me? She repeated, her voice tighter now, more static. She scanned the terrain with her targeting pod, a high-tech camera slung under the jet's belly. The infrared display showed a world of cold rocks and scattered patches of heat from the sun-baked earth. No muzzle flashes. No campfires. No signs of life. It was a ghost valley. The feeling of dread intensified. What if the comms tech was wrong? What if the intel about the advanced air defense was a ghost story, and the real problem was far simpler, that the SEALs had already been overrun? She banked the plane, her eyes sweeping across the desolate landscape. Her mind raced, replaying Thorne's cold dismissal. He wanted this mission to fail quietly. A team of SEALs lost in a remote valley was a tragedy. A downed A-10, an international incident. He wasn't just gambling with their lives. He was ensuring they had no chance to win. The thought fueled her anger, sharpening her focus. She had one last idea. The SEALs carried infrared strobes for emergencies, visible only through night vision or advanced optics. They were a last resort, a beacon that screamed, "Here I am," to friend and foe alike. Jake, she whispered into her microphone, as if he was sitting beside her. If you can hear me, light it up. Give me something to work with. She circled. Again, her gaze fixed on the screen of her targeting pod. The valley remained dark and lifeless. Her hope began to fray. Maybe Thorne was right. Maybe she was on a fool's errand, a reckless flight of fancy driven by misplaced loyalty. The doubt, a venomous whisper in her mind, grew louder. She was one pilot, in one old plane, against an entire valley of ghosts, and then she saw it. A tiny, rhythmic pulse of light. A pinprick in the overwhelming darkness. It was nestled in a cluster of rocks on a high ridge, almost invisible against the background clutter. Her heart leaped. Trident lead, I have you, she said, her voice filled with a rush of relief. I have your strobe. Talk to me, Jake. What's your status? This time, a voice answered, faint and distorted by damage to his radio. Valkyrie, good to hear your voice. We are in deep, pinned down on this ridge. Enemy has us zeroed in. We tried to break contact an hour ago, but they were waiting for us. It was an ambush. How many enemy combatants? Eva asked, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. Too many to count, Jake replied grimly. Dug in all around us. They are patient, just waiting for us to run out of bullets or daylight, whichever comes first. His voice faded for a second, and she heard him shouting to his men. Valkyrie, be advised, this valley is hot. They've got spotters everywhere. The moment you pop up over this ridge, they're going to light you up. That's what this old girl was built for, Eva said, a grim smile touching her lips. Just tell me where to put the rain. She began to climb, pulling the A-10 up just enough to clear the ridge that separated her from the SEAL's position. She needed to get eyes on the enemy, to map out their locations before she could provide any meaningful support. It was the most dangerous moment, the transition from unseen to seen. The second she crested the ridge, her cockpit lit up with warnings. A high-pitched squeal, the sound every pilot dreads, filled her helmet. The threat receiver. It was a radar lock. Solid. Unwavering, her training took over. She instinctively slammed the stick to the side, jinking the aircraft violently, and punched the chaff and flare dispenser. A cloud of metallic strips and burning magnesium pods erupted from the back of her plane, designed to confuse incoming missiles. But as she steadied the plane, her eyes flicked to the threat display panel. The knot of ice in her stomach returned, colder and harder than before. The radar signature wasn't one of the old Soviet-era systems she expected insurgents to have. It was a modern, frequency-hopping signal. A NATO signature. A voice, crisp and professional, came over the emergency guard frequency. The one channel no pilot can ignore. Unidentified aircraft, you have entered a restricted military operations area. You are in violation of direct orders. From CENTCOM Command. Identify yourself immediately. Eva was stunned into silence. It wasn't the enemy. It was one of their own. This is your only warning, the voice continued, calm and lethal. Alter your course and return to base. Failure to comply will result in defensive action. We are authorized to use force. She looked at her tactical display. A friendly fighter jet icon, an F-16, was closing on her position. Fast. Thorne hadn't just disowned her mission, he had sent an interceptor. He was actively trying to stop her, even if it meant using deadly force. She was no longer just a rogue pilot. She was a target. For her own side, she could turn back, plead her case, and hope for mercy. But on the other side of that ridge, Jake and his men were counting their last bullets. She looked from the closing F-16 icon to the faint, pulsing strobe of the SEALs. She was trapped between the fury of her own command and the guns of the enemy. The F-16 pilot's voice came again, closer now, with an unmistakable edge of finality. Valkyrie, I have a weapons grade. Lock on you. Colonel Thorne's orders. Stand down. This is your last chance. Asterisk, there is a solitude known only to fighter pilots, a profound isolation that comes when you are miles above the earth, moving faster than sound, with life or death decisions measured in fractions of a second. But for Captain Eva Rostova, this was a new kind of loneliness. She was being hunted not by the enemy, but by her own countrymen. The voice in her ear wasn't a stranger. It was a fellow pilot, following orders that had marked her for destruction. Valkyrie, I am not repeating myself again. The F-16 pilot, call sign Viper, transmitted, his voice tight with tension. Break off your attack run and climb. To 20,000 feet. Acknowledge. Eva's mind raced. An F-16 was faster, more agile, and armed with air-to-air missiles that could obliterate her Warthog from miles away. In a straight-up fight, she was hopelessly outmatched. But she wasn't in open sky. She was in a canyon. And she wasn't flying a thoroughbred fighter. She was flying a beast of burden designed to live and fight in the mud. Negative, Viper. Eva responded, her voice a low, steady calm that defied the chaos in her cockpit. I have friendly troops in contact. I will not abandon them. Then you leave me no choice, Viper's voice was grim. Fox 2. Fox 2. The call for firing an infrared-guided missile. Eva's blood ran cold. He had actually fired. She slammed the control stick hard left, pulling the A-10 into a gut-wrenching turn, diving deeper into the labyrinthine valley. She mashed the flare dispenser button, sending a stream of brilliant decoys spitting from her wings. The Warthog, for all its bulk, was surprisingly nimble at low speeds. She hugged the canyon wall, the tip of her wing so close she could almost count the rocks. The pursuing Sidewinder missile, homing in on her engine's heat, was momentarily confused by the flares. But it was a modern missile, with advanced countermeasures. It ignored the decoys and reacquired her signature. The high-pitched squeal of the lock tone returned to her headset, more insistent this time. She had one chance. A desperate, reckless maneuver her father had taught her on a simulator years ago. A move so dangerous it was officially forbidden. She chopped her throttles, deploying her air brakes simultaneously. The massive, straight wings of the A-10 acted like a parachute. The jet decelerated with shocking violence, her body thrown forward against the harness straps. The sleek F-16, designed for speed, couldn't slow down that fast. Viper, expecting her to try and outrun him, overshot her position, screaming past her and deeper into the canyon. For a split second, as he passed, Eva saw the silver glint of his fuselage. In that same instant, the Sidewinder missile, its tiny brain unable to process the sudden change in geometry, lost its lock and flew harmlessly past her, impacting the canyon wall ahead in a brilliant flash of orange and black. She had survived. But the F-16 was now looping around for another pass. She had only bought herself seconds. "Jake, talk to me," she grunted into the radio, fighting to control her breathing. "I need targets. Now." "Valkyrie, what the hell was that?" Jake's voice was a mix of awe and terror. "We saw the flash. We thought you were hit." "Just shaking off a persistent fly," Eva said, her eyes scanning the ridgeline. "Where are they?" "Everywhere," he yelled over a sudden burst of gunfire. "They're in the rocks, the caves. There's a command position in a fortified bunker on the eastern slope. It seems to be coordinating everything." Eva's targeting pod swiveled, its infrared lens zooming in on the eastern slope. She saw it. A concrete structure, cleverly camouflaged, nestled into the rock. Men were moving around it, carrying weapons and equipment. But something else caught her eye. Positioned around the bunker were several teams with shoulder-fired missile launchers. They weren't the bulky, crude shapes of older Soviet models. These were sleek, modern, and compact. As she watched, one of the teams shouldered their launcher and aimed it not at her, but at the sky behind her, in the direction of the approaching F-16 Viper. "Brake right. Brake right." Eva screamed. "Into the emergency channel. You have a missile launch at your 6 o'clock low." The F-16 pilot, caught by surprise, reacted instantly, pulling his jet into a hard climb. A streak of white smoke shot up from the ground, chasing him. Unlike Eva's Warthog, Viper's jet was equipped with the latest electronic countermeasures. A shimmering field of energy seemed to surround the F-16, and the missile veered off course, detonating harmlessly. But the event had changed the entire dynamic. The enemy wasn't just targeting her. They were targeting any air asset in the valley. They were confident, almost arrogant, in their ability to dominate the airspace. A chilling realization washed over Eva. Thorne's orders to Viper, they weren't just about stopping her. They were a trap. Thorne knew about this advanced air defense. He had sent the F-16 in, knowing it would draw fire, hoping the enemy would solve his Rostova problem for him. He was willing to risk an F-16 and its pilot to get her off the board. The sheer, calculated evil of it took her breath away. This was more than just covering up a failed mission. This was something darker. Jake's voice crackled again, this time with a new, terrifying piece of information. It was the midpoint shift, the revelation that would turn the entire mission on its head. "Valkyrie, one of my men got a close look at that launcher they just fired. We recovered fragments from a previous missile. It's not Russian. It's not Chinese." He paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Eva, the markings are American. The data plates match the specs for the new Stinger X prototypes. They went missing from a shipment out of Bagram 2 months ago. They shouldn't exist outside of a US testing range." The words hit Eva like a physical blow. Stinger X, a top-secret prototype program. Its guidance system was revolutionary, designed to be immune to all known countermeasures. The leak of such technology was a catastrophic failure of national security, and it explained everything. The enemy's confidence, the integrated network the Comstech had mentioned, Thorne's desperation to scrub the mission and anyone associated with it. He wasn't just covering up a battlefield loss. He was covering up high treason. Someone on the inside had sold these weapons to the enemy. Someone powerful. Someone like Colonel Marcus Thorne. The thought was so monstrous, so unthinkable, that Eva almost dismissed it. But the pieces fit together with sickening precision. Thorne's dismissal of the A-10, the perfect counter to this kind of threat. His insistence on a ground-only mission. His willingness to sacrifice the SEALs. His attempt to have her shot down by one of her own. He wasn't trying to prevent a bad outcome. He was trying to contain a truth that would destroy him. Her mission had just changed. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was an evidence-gathering operation. She had to save Jake and his men, not just for their sake, but for the secrets they now held. They were witnesses, and she was their only way out. "Copy that, Trident lead," Eva said, her voice now cold and hard as iron. The fear was gone, replaced by a glacial rage. I understand the situation. I'm starting my attack. Run. Target is the command bunker. She had to end this. Now. She ignored the F-16, which was circling at a safe altitude, its pilot likely confused and re-evaluating his orders. She pushed her nose down, pointing the snout of her Warthog directly at the fortified bunker. She was flying into a nest of the most advanced anti-air missiles on the planet, weapons stolen from her own country and sold by a traitor in her own command. The world narrowed to the green-tinted rectangle of her heads-up display. She centered the crosshairs on the bunker. Her thumb moved to the weapon selector, choosing the GAU-8 Avenger cannon. Jake, tell your boys to get their heads down, she said, her voice low. I'm about to make it rain. She squeezed the trigger. The sound was not an explosion. It was a roar, a visceral, soul-shaking thunder that seemed to rip the air apart. The A-10 shuddered as the massive cannon unleashed its fury. A stream of 30mm depleted uranium shells, firing at a rate of 65 rounds per second, slammed into the bunker. The concrete and rock erupted in a cascade of dust and fire. The sound, even over her own engines, was terrifying. It was the sound of BRE. She pulled up hard, the G-forces pressing her into her seat. She felt a moment of grim satisfaction. The bunker was gone. The command element was crippled, but as she banked away, her threat receiver shrieked again. This time, it wasn't a radar lock. It was a passive warning. An IR lock. Someone had fired a Stinger X at her from a different position. She popped her flares, but she knew it was useless. Jake had said these missiles were designed to ignore them. She jinked left, then right, but the missile warning tone stayed locked. On, a high-pitched death scream in her ears. On her display, she could see the missile's icon closing the distance with impossible speed. Its advanced seeker head wasn't being fooled. It was coming for her. The screen flashed with two words, stark and final. Impact imminent. In the anatomy of courage, there is a muscle that resides deeper than all others. It is the one that engages when survival is no longer an option, and the only thing left is purpose. As the Stinger X screamed toward her, Captain Eva Rostova's purpose was clear. She would not die in vain. If she was going down, she was going to take the enemy with her. With the missile seconds from impact, she didn't try to evade. Instead, she did the last thing the enemy would expect. She rolled her battered A-10 inverted and dived, pointing her nose back toward the ground, directly at a secondary cluster of enemy fighters who were emerging from a cave to press the attack on the SEALs. She was turning her aircraft into a weapon, her final act a defiant strike. The world outside her canopy became a spinning kaleidoscope of rock and sky. The missile, adjusting its trajectory to follow her sudden dive, slammed into the top of her left engine nacelle instead of the center mass of the fuselage. The impact was cataclysmic. A blast of white-hot shrapnel tore through the titanium armor surrounding the cockpit. The plane yawed violently, one wing dropping as the engine disintegrated into a ball of fire and black smoke. Alarms screamed in a dozen different pitches. The master caution light flashed like a strobe. The cockpit filled with the acrid smell of burning electronics and hydraulic fluid. A sharp pain lanced through her left arm as a piece of shrapnel pierced her flight suit, but she was still flying. Narrator, the A-10 Warthog is not an aircraft. It is a statement of intent. It is designed with a level of redundancy that borders on the paranoid. It can fly with one engine, half a wing, and no hydraulics. Pilots have a saying, the only way to kill a Warthog is to kill the pilot. Eva Rostova was wounded. Her plane was a wreck, but she was very much alive. She fought the controls, her good arm straining to keep the crippled jet level. The control stick felt sluggish, unresponsive. The hydraulics were gone. She was flying. On manual reversion, wrestling the plane through the air with nothing but steel cables and raw strength. Valkyrie, you're hit. You're on fire. Jake's voice yelled over the radio, laced with panic. Eject. Get out of there. Negative, Trident. Eva grunted, the pain in her arm a dull, throbbing fire. The cockpit is still intact. I can still fly. Blood was soaking through her sleeve, but she ignored it. Adrenaline was a powerful anesthetic. Did that last run do any good? Good. Jake's voice was incredulous. You leveled their command post. They are in chaos. But they're still coming. They know you're wounded. They're pressing the assault, trying to finish us before we can regroup. Eva looked at her weapons display. Most of her ordnance was gone or damaged. Her glorious GAU-8 cannon was jammed from the impact. She had flares, a few rockets, and one AGM-65 Maverick missile left. One smart bomb. One chance to turn this fight around for good. The enemy knew it, too. With their central command gone, the Stinger X launchers were operating independently, but they were still lethal. They were creating a deadly web of fire around the SEAL's position, daring her to come closer. They knew her plane was crippled. They were just waiting for her to make a mistake. She descended again, this time with a pronounced wobble, the A-10 trailing a thick plume of black smoke. She was a wounded shark, circling a school of piranhas. The ground fire intensified, a blizzard of tracer rounds reaching up for her. They stitched lines of light across the sky, all aimed at her. She was a flying target, drawing every ounce of their attention. And that was exactly what she wanted. "Jake," she said, her voice strained. "While they're all looking at me, you need to move. Get your men off that ridge. There's a wash on the southwest side. It should provide some cover. Can you make it?" There was a pause. "It's a long way, Eva. We've got 2 wounded." "You're not going to survive on that ridge," she stated flatly. "I'm going to buy you some time. Get moving. Now." She heard him shout orders to his men. Then, his voice came back, quieter, more personal. "You're not getting out of this valley, are you?" Eva looked at her fuel gauge. It was dropping at an alarming rate from a leak in the wing tank. Her left engine was a smoldering wreck. Her arm was on fire. "Just get your men home, Jake," she whispered. "That's all that matters." She then began the most dangerous dance of her life. She flew her crippled Warthog in a slow, agonizing circle, deliberately making herself the most tempting target in the world. She flew low enough for them to see the smoke, to see the damage, to taste the kill. The Stinger X teams, hungry and overconfident, took the bait. One after another, they revealed their positions, launching their precious, high-tech missiles at the wounded bird Eva, using the last of her flares, and the A-10's legendary durability weathered the storm. One missile was decoyed by a lucky flare. Another she defeated by ducking behind a massive rock spire at the last second, letting the missile smash into the stone. Each launch was a victory, because each launch depleted the enemy's most dangerous weapon. She was counting. 4 missiles fired. 5. 6. She was systematically disarming them, one terrifying pass at a time. But her luck and her aircraft couldn't hold out forever. Her remaining engine began to sputter, starved of fuel. The controls grew heavier, the plane threatening to stall with every turn. Time was running out. The SEALs were moving, but they were still exposed. The bulk of the enemy forces, armed with heavy machine guns and RPGs, were entrenched in a fortified cave complex at the base of the valley, directly in the SEALs' path of retreat. This was the final obstacle, the one she had saved her last. Maverick Missile 4. But there was a problem. A huge one. The cave entrance was on the side of a sheer cliff, protected by a massive overhang of rock. She couldn't get a direct line of sight. The Maverick's guidance system needed to see the target to lock onto it. From her angle, the target was invisible. She could fly directly at it, but that would be a suicide run with no guarantee of success. She had to find another way. Her mind, sharpened by adrenaline and desperation, raced through 1,000 tactical possibilities. And then, an idea sparked. An insane, unorthodox plan that relied on physics, geometry, and a breathtaking amount of luck. It was a plan that would have gotten her failed out of flight school. It was a plan born of pure, unadulterated desperation. She keyed her MIC, her voice weak but clear. "Jake, I have an idea. It's unconventional." "We are kind of past conventional at this point, Valkyrie," he replied, his breathing heavy as he ran. "What are you thinking?" "The cave entrance. I can't see it, but the cliff wall above it. It's almost perfectly sheer, like a mirror." A confused silence followed. "A mirror? Eva, what are you talking about?" "I'm going to paint the target with my laser designator," she explained, her words coming in short, sharp bursts as she fought the controls. "But I'm not going to aim at the cave. I'm going to aim at the cliff face on the opposite side of the canyon." The laser will reflect off that wall and illuminate the target under the overhang. The Maverick should be able to pick up the reflected laser spot. Jake was silent for a long moment, processing the sheer audacity of her plan. Firing a laser-guided bomb using a canyon wall as a mirror. It was beyond textbook. It was something from a comic book. "That's the craziest damn thing I've ever heard," he finally said. "Can that even work?" "The physics says it should," Eva grunted, lining up her plane for the final run. She was flying perpendicular to the target, a maneuver that made her a broad, slow target for every gun on the ground. But the laser has to be held perfectly steady on the reflection point. Any deviation and the missile loses its track. She armed the Maverick. The growl of the Seeker head filled her cockpit. She designated a spot on the opposing canyon wall, a smooth patch of granite that shimmered in the afternoon sun. On her screen, she watched the laser designator box flicker. Trying to lock. "I'm starting my run," she said, her voice dropping low. The ground fire was deafening now, a hailstorm of lead and steel clattering against her armored fuselage. Warning lights she didn't even know existed were now blinking on her console. Her vision started to tunnel, the edges turning grey from the pain and G-forces. She was flying on instinct and rage alone. "Valkyrie, they're onto you." Jake yelled. "They know what you're doing. They're concentrating all their fire on your position." She ignored him. Her entire world had shrunk to a single point of light on her screen, the reflection of her laser. She had to hold it steady. She fought the dying plane, her muscles screaming, her wounded armor useless, burning weight. The jet bucked and shuddered, threatening to tear itself apart. But she held it. She held the laser steady. The lock tone shifted from a growl to a steady, high-pitched scream. She had it. A lock. Her thumb moved to the red button on her control stick. "Trident lead," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "Splash 1." With her last ounce of strength, she pressed the button. "Fox 3, she whispered. The Maverick missile dropped from its pylon, its rocket motor igniting with a brilliant flash, and shot away from her crippled aircraft. It wasn't flying toward the enemy. It was flying toward a blank slab of rock on the far side of the canyon. Some moments are defined by thunderous noise, others by a silence that holds the weight of the world. As the single Maverick missile flew, not toward the enemy, but toward an unremarkable patch of stone, the entire valley seemed to hold its breath. On the ground, the SEALs, now taking cover in the wash, watched in stunned disbelief. In the sky, Captain Eva Rostova, her consciousness fading, held her crippled A-10 on its suicidal course, keeping the laser pointed at the reflection point. Everything, the lives of the SEALs, the truth about the traitor, her own survival, rested on a principle of light she'd last studied in a high school physics class. The missile reached the far canyon wall. For a horrifying microsecond, it seemed destined to simply smash into the rock. But its Seeker head, guided by the reflected laser spot that was invisibly painting the real target, made a last-second, impossibly sharp correction. It jinked hard, diving down and under the protective rock overhang, and flew directly into the mouth of the enemy's cave fortress. The detonation was not a single boom. It was a deep, guttural concussion that shook the very foundations of the mountain. A massive fireball erupted from the cave entrance, followed by a shockwave that kicked up a storm of dust and rock. The overhanging ledge, its support vaporized, groaned and then collapsed in a titanic rockslide, sealing the cave forever under thousands of tons of granite. The primary enemy force was not just eliminated, it was buried. A ragged cheer went up over the SEALs' comm channel. The tide hadn't just turned, the dam had broken. The remaining scattered enemy fighters, their leadership annihilated and their spirit shattered, broke and ran. But in the cockpit of Hawk Wild, there was only a cascade of failures. The strain of the final maneuver was too much. The last engine sputtered, coughed, and died. The only sound now was the wind whistling over the canopy and the blare of the stall warning horn. Eva's A-10 was no longer a plane. It was a 10-ton glider. "Eva, we are clear. You did it." Jake's voice was jubilant, triumphant. "Head for home, Valkyrie. We'll buy you a steak the size of Texas." Eva's head slumped forward. She keyed the MIC, her voice a faint, airy whisper. "Can't, Jake. I'm out of gas and altitude." Her vision was almost gone, the world a blurry grey fog. She was going down. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the haze in her headset. Not an alarm, but the crisp, authoritative voice of the F-16 pilot, Viper. "Valkyrie, this is Viper. I have you in sight. Your sacrifice will not be in vain. I am engaging the remaining hostiles and will escort SAR helicopters to the SEALs. Position." His voice had lost its cold, official tone, replaced by one of profound, humbled respect. "Colonel Thorne's orders be damned. No one is left behind today." He had seen it all. Her defiance, her courage, the impossible shot. She had not only saved the SEALs, she had shown a fellow pilot what duty truly meant, narrator, and that's when the second twist, the one born not of battlefield tactics but of pure evil, was revealed. Back at Red Rock Air Base, the young comms airman who had helped Eva had been doing more than just praying. Terrified by the discovery of the Stinger X missiles, he had started digging. Using his access, he scanned all of Colonel Thorne's encrypted communications from the last 48 hours. And he found it. A burst transmission, sent minutes after Eva went rogue, to an offshore, untraceable account. The message was short, but its meaning was devastating. "IT read, asset compromised. Valkyrie is en route. Sanitize the package. No. Witnesses." Thorne hadn't just sold the missiles. He had orchestrated this entire operation. The high-value target in the valley was the middleman who had brokered the deal. Thorne had sent the SEALs in to eliminate him, expecting them to be wiped out in the process by the very weapons he had supplied, erasing all links back to him. Eva's arrival had threatened to expose the entire conspiracy. The airman, his hands shaking, hit record. He routed the audio of the treasonous message to the base commander's office and every command channel on the network. The betrayal was out, but in the Tarmac Valley, the final danger was just emerging. Eva, fighting to keep her plane from falling into an uncontrolled spin, thought the worst was over. The SEALs were safe. The truth was coming out. All she had to do was find a flat piece of land to crash on. That's when her threat receiver, which had been blessedly silent, screamed to life with a new, terrifying tone. It wasn't a Stinger X. It was the radar of a cutting-edge, fourth-generation fighter jet, appearing as if from nowhere, climbing at supersonic speed from a hidden airfield on the other side of the border. A voice, distorted and cold, crackled. Over a private channel she couldn't shut off. It was Thorne, using a satellite link. "You should have listened, Captain. You should have stayed on the ground." His voice was laced with a chilling, triumphant calm. "You beat the insurgents. Congratulations. But you can't beat a Su-35. My associate is very keen to retrieve his property, and to ensure you don't have a debriefing." This was the false ending. The moment the audience thinks the hero is safe, only for the true villain to reveal his final, deadliest card. A state-of-the-art air superiority fighter, piloted by a mercenary, was now hunting her crippled, powerless A-10. This was Thorne's cleanup crew. "Viper, I have a bogey on me. Hostile fighter, coming up fast from the east." Eva yelled into the radio, "Copy, Valkyrie, I see him." Viper responded, "But I'm out of air-to-air missiles. I used my last one on that ground target." Eva was alone again. A wounded duck against a wolf. The Su-35 was one of the most maneuverable fighters in the world. It danced around her, its pilot toying with her, a cat with a broken-winged mouse. But the mercenary pilot got greedy. He wanted the kill to be up close and personal. He swooped in behind her, slowing his advanced jet down to match her speed, preparing for a cannon kill. It was a fatal mistake. He forgot what he was hunting. An A-10 pilot is never more dangerous. Then when they're cornered, Eva did the one thing he didn't expect. She slammed her rudder, skidding the A-10 sideways, a maneuver that would tear the wings off a lesser plane. At the same time, she hit the emergency override for her jammed GAU-8 cannon. The override sent a massive electrical charge through the firing mechanism, forcing the jam shell through. The Su-35 pilot, caught completely by surprise by her sudden sideways movement, overshot her. For one single, glorious second, his sleek, advanced fuselage filled her entire windscreen. Eva's thumb found the trigger. Bah. The Avenger cannon, firing from a dead engine, roared to life for one final, half-second burst. It wasn't a long stream of fire, just a handful of rounds. But it was enough. The 30mm depleted uranium shells, shells that can kill a tank, turned the advanced enemy fighter into a cloud of confetti and fire. The explosion rocked her plane, but it held together. Silence descended once more. The wolf was dead. Eva found what passed for a runway, a long, flat stretch of desert floor. She brought the Warthog down, not with a landing, but with a controlled crash. The gear collapsed, and Hog Wild skidded. For 1,000 yards on its belly in a cloud of dust and screaming metal before finally coming to a stop, silence, she was alive. When the rescue helicopter brought her back, the entire base was waiting. Not with MPs and handcuffs, but with a silent, solemn assembly of pilots, crew chiefs, and airmen. In the command center, Colonel Thorne was being led away in handcuffs. His face a mask of disbelief as the recording of his own voice echoed from the speakers. The ultimate poetic justice, betrayed by the very technology he used to commit his treason. As Eva, arm in a sling, her face bruised and soot-stained, stepped. Off the helicopter, she saw a line of men waiting for her. It was Jake Callahan and the survivors of SEAL Team Trident. They were battered and bruised, but they were alive. Jake stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He simply raised his hand to his brow in a slow, perfect salute. One by one, the rest of his team followed suit. The ultimate gesture of respect. From the most respected warriors in the world. It was a salute not to a captain, or to a general's daughter, but to Valkyrie, the angel of the canyon who came in at tree level, with no escort, when everyone else said it was impossible. Months later, Major Eva Rostova stood before a new class of A-10 pilot trainees. Her arm was healed, a faint scar the only reminder of the fire. The shadow of her father was gone, replaced by the bright, unshakable light of her own legacy. They will tell you this aircraft is old, she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing in the briefing room. They will tell you. It's slow. They will tell you it's obsolete. She paused, a faint, confident smile on her lips. Let them. Because one day, a soldier will be trapped on a ridge, out of ammo and out of hope. And his radio will crackle to life. And he will hear the roar of our engines. On that day, you will not be old, or slow, or obsolete. You will be the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. In her eyes, there was no doubt, only the fierce, quiet resolve of a warrior who had faced the storm and emerged, not just as a survivor, but as the storm itself. Her name was Eva Rostova, and she had earned her wings.